I hate that thing when I open up the quick, what do they call that when you command tab? What's that called?
I know. I just I'm blanking on it right now.
Yeah, whenever I hit that and I have my mouse.
App switcher.
There you go. Whenever I'm in the app switcher, I hate it whenever I'm doing that, but my hand is on the mouse and I accidentally move the mouse and then it automatically selects whatever the cursor is over. And then I end up in some random application I didn't want to be in. I do that more than I care to admit.
Have you ever had it where you start moving the mouse and then it'll start moving to the right and then you let go of the mouse and it just keeps going?
No, I have not had that.
Yeah, I use a couple different applications that kind of modify that a little bit. One of them is I've used Witch. I don't think I have it active at the moment, actually, but it allows you to go, instead of just to a specific app, a specific window. So if you have like a bunch of Safari windows open, for example, you can choose the one that you want to open.
Nice.
So it's kind of nice. But it does funky things with the app switcher. And occasionally it will get stuck in this like carousel loop where I can just see it like scroll from left to right and then go back to the right and scroll again and just keep going.
It's like it's taken over your computer and you can no longer control the thing that you're supposed to control.
Exactly. Kind of freaky when you think about it.
It's true. It's true. So I'm looking at our list of follow-up here, and someone sent in, this is a Roger, who sent in a quote via contact form, I believe, on the Bookworm site.
I know this, and Roger.
You do know this, Roger?
Yeah, Roger is a member of the dojo, and he's posted essentially like a 12-week year thing where he wants to be held accountable for writing poetry, and his poetry is really good. I'll try to find a link so we can share it in the show notes and give Roger a shout out.
Nice. Well, I was not familiar with Roger, so Roger sent in this quote by Mortimer Adler, which I thought was very fitting, and I wanted to share it here. So here we go. So Mortimer Adler, in the case of good books, the point is not how many of them you can get through, but rather how many can get through to you. Which I thought was very fitting, since that seems to be our intent with Bookworm, is not so much about how many books we go through, but getting something out of them. So there you go. I liked that one. It was a good quote. Thanks, Roger.
Very profound, Mortimer/Roger.
Roger did the hard work of digging it up. Mortimer did the harder work of figuring it out.
No, I totally agree with this quote, though, and I really like it. I was interesting. I was listening to your latest Whims at Work, and you and Drew were talking about reading books, and I found it interesting the way that Drew reads books, where he's got the Apple. You can tell me if I'm messing this up, because I was listening to it in the car on the way here, actually. Right. But it sounds like Drew actually has Apple Notes open and then has Kindle kind of on a slide over. So he'll read and then he'll go to Notes, and then he'll take the notes and Apple Notes and kind of slide the book over when he's reading it, and slide it off when it needs to get out of the way, so you can actually interact with Apple Notes. I think that's a really cool idea. I also, like, for the life of me, cannot get on board with the whole digital books thing. I've used the Overdrive app that he talks about.
Yeah, that's kind of a sticking point for us on that show.
Yeah, it's decent, and I had the same revelation, like, oh my gosh, there are all these awesome ebooks that you can get with your library card. That's amazing. Yep. But then also, like, the whole checking them out thing does seem weird. And I have like a huge collection of digital books that I never read because, I don't know, Drew is a better person than I, because whenever I sit down with an iPad, it's not long before I end up in a social media app. I cannot, with a digital device, say, okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to do this, unless I've got some sort of support system. On the Mac, that isn't like a physical barrier where it's like blocking me from those things, but I run the app Timing, and it gives me a report. So I know that if I'm slacking off, I'm going to get a report the next morning that says, hey, you were only 50% productive yesterday, and I'm going to feel bad about that. And I don't like that feeling, so I try to avoid that.
Nice. Yeah, I don't know. Like, Drew's got the whole e-reader thing figured out. I think he has a little more self-discipline than I do, because I could not. I can't do that. I need to make sure, like, even when I sit down to read, I make sure my phone, I set it down on the couch as I'm walking to the other side of the couch such that I can read, so that my phone is not within arm's length. I have to do that.
Yeah. And I mean, it's kind of interesting because I used to be a big digital book person, like I said, but I found that I never read those books. I was probably one of the first people to embrace digital books. I remember that Oyster app that he was talking about. It was awesome. And then I remember seeing, like, when Kindle Unlimited was announced, my initial thought was, this sounds amazing. They're probably going to have a bunch of junky books in there, and it's not going to be anything close to Oyster, but no one's going to understand that, and Oyster's going to go out of business within 6 months. And that's basically what happened.
That's exactly what happened.
But I've gone, like, completely the other way, where I'm now as much of a book snob, I feel, as I am a coffee snob, where, like, I don't even just get, like, the physical books. I get the hardcover books whenever possible.
Nice.
Because I like stacking up all those hardcovers on my bookshelf.
Well, I'm with you on the paper book thing. That's something that I know it helps me in a lot of different ways. But I like seeing the physical books, because then I can look back at, these are the ones I've gone through. And I do, especially whenever I'm putting a book away after I've finished reading it, I have a habit of looking through the ones that are the other ones that are on that shelf. And I keep finished books and yet to read books separate on my bookshelf, so I can always see the ones that I have completed, and I like to look through that shelf just to see, here are the ones I've gone through. And it's not uncommon for me to see one of those, pick it up and thumb through it just out of curiosity. And I don't think I would ever do that with a digital library. Like, I don't think I would, as I complete a book, I wouldn't look through the list of books that are there. Not to mention, it'd be a lot harder to do that all at one shot. But I just don't see myself ever doing that.
Right. So on the topic of analog versus digital, why don't you tell us about your new email machine?
My new email machine. That's one way to look at it, I suppose. So if you're in the latest whims at work, you've heard about my new computer. And for the listeners, if you want to know that whole story as to why I have a new computer and all that, you can go check out that episode. I'm not going to repeat all of that here because it's kind of a long story. But I have a new MacBook Pro, of course, space gray, but it's one of the new ones. So it's 3 weeks old, 4 weeks old, maybe as of when they released it. But
yeah, it's better than mine.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. And it makes my life much, much nicer in the world of what I do on my Mac. So I'm excited about said Mac.
Yeah, it's looking at the specs that you got here, it's fairly identical to mine. I'm a little bit surprised also that you went with the 13-inch, just because the 13-inch does not have a dedicated video card, which Yep. I know from past experience, I had the same thought. I love the 13-inch. I'm going to stick with the 13-inch because of the portability. And then hit the wall where I was bashing my head against it because it couldn't export videos, and it was basically taxed to the limit. So you have to let us know how that works for you in about 6 months, I guess.
Well, I debated the 15, but it's just too big for. I move around and travel enough that it's just too much to try to do that. I'm not going to have multiple machines for things like that. I have run some video through it, and I can tell you it's significantly faster than the one I had previously. And I think that has more to do with the 16 gig of RAM that I have on it. I think that's mostly what it is. But I'm with you. I know that the dedicated video card would have made it even faster. But the way that my workflows are set up, I don't get too caught up in the need for that. Because if I'm cranking out like a 10-minute video, which is a longer video for me, like even doing that, it only takes it like 30 minutes to crank it out. So I can easily work on the next one if I've got that. And by the time I've got the next one ready to go, that one's done. So it doesn't really change anything. And it essentially takes me from needing to wait on it to not waiting on it. And that's a big deal in my workflows.
Fair enough.
That's what I know. Also Touch ID on the Mac.
That's yeah.
Love that.
It's awesome. I like Touch ID. I could care less about the touch bar.
Really? See, you love Touch Bar. You heard that episode. I love Touch Bar.
I did, yeah. And I was kind of surprised, honestly, because the Touch Bar, the issue I have with it is that it's supposed to be context aware and switch with the apps that you're using. But the fact that it changes means that the buttons aren't always in the same place. And so I find it very difficult to establish any sort of like muscle memory that you would with traditional keyboard shortcuts using the controls that are on the touch bar itself. And I find that I end up just bumping it by accident more often than not.
Now, see, this is where I think some of my developer habits come in, because that muscle memory on the touch bar translates perfectly. And I think that's because so many of the applications I use, I treat touch bar as like another keyboard shortcut. And that essentially means that I have context-aware keyboard shortcuts, and they may be the same shortcut, but they do different things in different applications. So I'm already used to that process, and whenever it gets to the touch bar, like even using Apple Mail, I know where the archive and delete buttons are, and even though they are right next to each other on the touch bar, I don't think I've missed once on hitting the right one. So, and I'm not even looking at it anymore. So yeah, I could see what you're getting at. I think for me, I'm so sensitive in how I move and use input devices on my Mac that it just doesn't matter.
Well, if it's working for you, more power to you. But I don't understand. I guess you could show me in a couple days.
Oh yeah. I'll show it to you. I mean, it's pretty slick, I think, but maybe that's just because I've customized it in a couple small ways to make that possible. Like I've seen a few people that think I'm crazy because I put the lock button right next to the Touch ID sensor, and that essentially means that as I'm hitting the delete button, if I go too high, I will accidentally lock the computer, which happens, but not very frequently. But whenever that does happen, it's very easy to just slide over, push the Touch ID button to kick it back on, and then it automatically logs in. So it's like this 1 second, whoops.
It's probably way quicker than hitting the Siri button and then having it sit there and try to process what you're saying, even when you're not saying anything, and then say, I'm sorry, I didn't get that. Here's what you can say to me.
To quit. Yeah, I don't use Siri on the Mac. I don't know why. It just seems weird to me. I figure if I'm going to do that, I'm going to use my phone.
You can only see the phrase, "you're filing and so styling," so many times.
There you go. All right, tell me about your new journal and meditation.
Yeah, actually, one other thing I want to point out here regarding the MacBook and the touch bar. Do you use Better Touch Tool at all?
I don't.
Okay. Check out Better Touch Tool, because they actually have the ability to program these essentially like keyboard maestro type shortcuts. But you can, instead of having it assigned to a swipe gesture or a keyboard combination, you can actually create like workflow buttons for your touch bar.
Interesting. Now, see,
this seems like a total Joe thing.
Yeah, I could maybe see getting behind that. I have not gone the route of Better Touch Tool in the past. It's something I'm very aware of and have considered a number of times, but I've never gotten into it. I've also never gotten into Keyboard Maestro at all, because it's very easy for me to just use Automator to create services and write my own scripts for that and assign them keyboard shortcuts. So
I suppose really if you know scripting, then Automator's got just about everything that you would possibly need.
Right. Right.
But I had done a two-part series for Screencasts Online on Mac automation, and it was right after the new MacBook Pros had come out, and I had one with a touch bar, and so I saw something about Better Touch Tool being able to use like the touch bar shortcut. So there's actually an example of that if you go into Screencasts Online, but I've only scratched the surface of it. But it seems like if you're really going to use a touch bar to customize your workflow, which is kind of the potential there, then Better Touch Tool is definitely worth a look.
Yeah, I'll take a look. No promises. I tend to dial things in, and then once I know how they work, I tend to leave them because I can become more efficient with them that way. So
makes sense.
I'm not much of a fiddler anymore, it seems.
All right, so my new journal. Let me grab a link here, because this is going to be a little bit difficult to explain. So after we recorded the 12-week year episode for Theoretical Accountability, your other podcast.
Oh, right, because you joined us on that one.
Yeah, I was kind of in the middle of my 12-week year planning, and I had done the planning, but I was still looking for a system to help it stick and help me follow through with it every single day. And then randomly, I saw this, and maybe was even an Instagram ad, which was odd, but I gave it a look and I ordered it, and it's awesome. So now I need to find Chrome, and I'll paste this here for you. This is called the Self Journal. And what it is it is essentially a Moleskine type journal, which has a bunch of stuff built into it. Like the pages are designed to help you implement successfully a 12-week year. They don't call it 12-week year. It's not branded 12-week year. In fact, they say like a 13-week period or something like that.
But it follows that same time frame.
Yeah, it's the same concept. And so what you do at the beginning of the journal is there's these different sections. So there's a section where you identify your 3 goals, and then the 3 things that you need to do underneath each of those goals. There's a page for every week, so you can go back weekly and evaluate your week. And then there are the daily pages where it's got space where you can plan out your day. So there's like 6 to 9, I think, on the left. And then on the right, there's like places to add notes. So it's kind of like a calendar, but then there's also space for like morning gratitude, evening gratitude. What are the things that would make today a win? There's space to write your goals so that you see it every single day. And it's just something that is designed to help the 12-week year approach actually stick. Now, I've only been doing this since the beginning of this week, so 3 days. But
so maybe not enough to know.
It's definitely not enough to say that, yes, this is the thing. But I'm super excited about what I am seeing with this, because this is part of like a whole bunch of things that have been happening that have all kind of aligned together. Okay, so I also mentioned, I think on Theoretical Accountability, the book 10% Happier by Dan Harris, which is actually my gap book for today. So maybe we'll talk about this a little bit later. But that is Dan Harris of NBC Nightline, who had a panic attack on the air and then decided to try meditation. And it's basically, it's not even like a prescriptive type book where, like a lot of the books that we read for Bookworm are, it's more like a biography. It's more just his story about how he thought meditation was crazy, and then he ended up going to this 10-day silent retreat, and he's like, well, why the heck am I here? And then the breakthroughs that he had and all that type of stuff.
Right.
But he's a really, really good writer, and the story is awesome. And it's just very easy to track with it. And the way that he writes, I felt like he was speaking directly to me in a lot of the situations. Like there's a lot of very similar situations, I felt like, or a lot of similar emotions, at least the way that he was describing them. And so, like, I've known for a while, we've talked about on this podcast, that meditation is something that would be beneficial for me. And after reading that book, going through the 12-week year stuff, I actually have one of my 12-week year goals is to establish a meditation habit. And so having the self journal as a place where I'm tracking those habits and being forced to go back to that journal multiple times per day, because there's the morning gratitude and the evening gratitude, is making this stuff stick. And again, very small sample size. I know that. But I can also tell you that my wife and I were talking just last night, actually, about the changes that she's seen in me since I started doing this. Because what the meditation practice does, and I think that there's a couple pieces here. It's the meditation in the morning, because I do it in the morning. And it's also coupled with the gratitude that's part of this self journal. That just like completely changes how I approach my day. I can't even describe exactly what the change is, but I can tell you that whenever I encounter something, I'm able to understand, like in the book, the 10% Happier book, he talks about how meditation is essentially mindfulness and recognizing that this thing is happening, but you don't have to get upset about it. You don't have to get super excited about it. You can just be grateful that this thing is happening. You can observe it, and then you can move on to the next thing. You can always be fully present, I think is how he put it. And that's kind of a buzzword in the productivity space, but hopefully that makes sense. And I've noticed that where like I can just appreciate what is happening without stressing about all the things that I know I have to do today, even though nothing else has changed from a task management perspective. It's literally just I'm getting up a little bit earlier. I'm writing down this gratitude in this best self journal, and I am meditating for 5 minutes before I start my day, and it's made an incredible difference. So there will probably be another meditation book on the horizon that'll make you go through with me.
How long have you been doing this meditation thing? Because if you're seeing that much of a benefit in how long of a time?
Just a couple of days. I started it this week, so I don't know, 3 days, 4 days.
Wow, that's impressive to see that much difference in that short of time.
Consistency, though. I mean, I'm not like Dan Harris mentions in a podcast that he's got a 10% happier podcast as well. There was an episode I listened to where they had Gary Vaynerchuk on, and they were trying to get him to meditate, which was entertaining. But Gary Vee asked him, like, well, how long do you meditate? And he's like, I meditate for 2 hours every day. And Gary Vee's like, oh, that'd be great. I'd love to not have all this stuff to do. And Dan's like, no, I got lots of stuff to do. That's why I have to meditate. Because if I don't meditate, I'm not in the proper mental space to handle these things the right way. They take longer. I mess up. I've got to do it over. And that was just kind of like a bombshell to Gary Vee. But I've noticed that on a micro level. You know, I'm not going away on a 10-day silent retreat. I'm not doing this for hours a day, but I can tell you that from doing it consistently, even for a very small time period, it has made a huge difference.
Interesting. Yeah, because I feel like I've gone down that path before, and after a few days, even after a couple weeks of doing it every single day, still didn't see even what you're seeing in like 2 days. So that's why I'm kind of like, wow, because it didn't get anywhere close to that for me.
Yeah, see, I've done that before too. I've tried it, quote unquote, before too, and it's not worked. And so as I'm thinking about like what is different this time, I think it's a couple things. Number one, I read that 10% Happier book, and even though it's a lot of just the story behind it, Dan Harris does a really good job of explaining the things that he's learned along the way. And so it's an entertaining read that gives you, I think, a pretty good idea of what meditation should be or mindfulness should be without the prescriptive, very traditional like Eastern philosophy type stuff. And that's what most people think of if they're not familiar with meditation, is like the Eastern religion, the Buddhism, stuff like that. And there is like, I don't know how to describe this. The practice of meditation couples nicely with that belief system, I guess, but that doesn't mean that you can't use the practice of meditation. Like for me, it's explicitly a Christian belief system. They're not mutually exclusive. You don't have to pick one or the other. And I think that it's not necessarily, I don't know. I guess it's kind of unfortunate that it's been coupled so closely with Buddhism, because I think that's alienating to a lot of people like myself who are just kind of like, oh, I don't want to go into meditation because that's taboo or whatever. Like there's a stigma associated with that, which whether you believe it to be right or wrong, like you kind of want to distance yourself from it if you don't really understand it. But the practice of meditation, if you're able to isolate it, I think has a lot of value. And in that episode with Gary Vee, he talks about the reason that he's on there is he thinks that this is the next big health breakthrough, that in the future, everybody's going to be meditating, because there's all this research that's being done right now that shows that it helps you in all of these different areas. So he thinks that essentially there's a lot of money to be made in meditation in the future. But
interesting. Okay. Well, I am looking forward to the book that you're potentially proposing somewhere in the future on this. I will jump into it wholeheartedly with you and read through, but I will remain a skeptic because I've tried it multiple times. So you need to keep this going so that you can continue to tell me that it's helpful.
Fair enough. And the other thing I think that makes this work for me is that I've made this part of my 12-week year. And again, like that journal helps me because I've written it all down now. It's pen and paper. Like I can't change it. I could obviously like cross it off and write something else if I wanted to. But I've said that in the next 90 days, I'm going to give this my best shot. And so if I say 2 weeks from now that, this isn't really working, I'm just going to give up on this. Like I've sabotaged my 12-week year essentially. So I think that creates a little bit, it makes it a little bit more sticky as well.
Makes sense. All right, how's the conflict in every meeting going?
This is interesting. Okay, so my wife listened to the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. She really liked that episode. She
could tolerate Josh.
She loved Josh's perspective on that book. So that was pretty cool. She said that it was really interesting, the dynamic with all 3 of us. So that was a fun episode to record. Sounds like it's a fun episode to listen to, at least according to my wife.
Yeah, and that's one of those things. We are on it, so you can't get a true feel for how people will see it.
Yep.
And the number of times that I wish I could see how someone else views this podcast, I so value that perspective because I can't get it.
Mm-hmm. Right, absolutely. But coming back to the conflict in every meeting thing, so my wife is on board with this, and she understands the principle, and so we've kind of applied that to our family meetings, where she actually brought it up last time. She's like, okay, so where's the conflict here? Like, what are we actually resolving? I also actually brought it up last night, even in, we've got an outreach team that we head up at our church. And so there's 8 people that we work with on this team. Well, us and 6 others. And I actually mentioned that, like, I was casting the vision essentially for how we want the team to work. And I brought up the fact that, like, we want this to be the place where we can have discussion. We don't want just a list of agenda items. Like, this is information we want to tell you. We want there to be actual communication. We want your input. We want weigh in before there's buy-in. And if you have any issues or any concerns about anything, like, we want to have honest and open discussion about it here. And I actually use the phrase, we want conflict in every meeting.
Nice.
So I'm trying to spread this slowly, but one thing that I have noticed with this is I have to be careful about how I bring the conflict, because there are some teams that I am involved with where they don't have this mindset at all. And if I try to bring conflict, it can appear to come across as a personal attack, I've discovered. And it's
that sounds like you've been burnt a couple times.
Not necessarily, but I was having a meeting, and then somebody brought up, like, I said something in the meeting, essentially just to kind of correct a problem that I had seen, or an observation that I made, and like, okay, if we really want this to be successful, this is what we all should do. And afterwards, somebody came up to me and was like, hey, you were talking about me and this guy, right? And I'm like, no, sorry, I didn't even think about that, because my mind, it's weird. I don't want to make it sound like I've arrived or anything like that, but, like, my approach to meetings is completely different than how other people approach meetings, I am recognizing. And so my interpretation of the events in the meetings is completely different from other people's interpretation of the events. So that's kind of the revelation I've had, is I need to be careful and consider all the possible ways that this could be interpreted until, I guess, the teams that I'm on get to that same point where we've battled through all of those 5 different levels, or all those 5 different dysfunctions, and we can have that honest and open conversation. That's obviously the goal. But I can't just show up and be like, conflict. Yeah. That's not going to end well.
Right. I know that so many of the meetings I get into, they're with clients, and it's typically because I don't have to work to create the conflict, not create it, but to work through a conflict, because typically whenever I'm on a call or in meeting over video or something like that, which is always interesting when you get other cultures involved, but whenever I'm in those, they have a problem that I'm there to solve. If you really boil it down, there is a conflict or something that we're trying to work through as it is, because they want something, they want a new website, they want features added to an existing platform. Like, there is something that doesn't work and they want it fixed. So they are bringing the conflict, which makes my life a lot easier. But it also gets very tricky, like I alluded to a little bit ago, is whenever you throw in another culture or a different way of doing meetings, it just complicates things. It makes it very tricky.
Yeah, I can totally see that. I haven't had to necessarily deal with that, I don't believe, but yeah. So conflict in every meeting is
though. Like, in your role, I don't know that you would ever. I don't think you would need to know or see that. Does that make sense? Because I think with what you do, you're doing maybe some one-on-one stuff, but you have a set number of teams that you're involved with, and you tend to build longer-term relationships with those. Whereas in my scenario, it's very easy for me to be meeting with a different team every single week.
Yeah, that's true. That is definitely true. So conflict in every meeting is still a work in progress, but I feel like we're getting there.
Yeah. Cool. Well, on that note, let's transition into today's book, because talking about conflict, there's always going to be the time when you need to say no. And that brings us into today's book, which is my pick of The Power of a Positive No by William Ury. And this is one that I feel it floats around the productivity world quite a bit, it seems. And it's extremely helpful. You know, that William Ury has had a handful of books that came out before this. And this is a way, because he's the author of Getting to Yes. And he realized in the process of writing that and going through with people after the fact that there's also the side of saying no, not just yes. So this is kind of the counter to that, which is very helpful because we all need to say no, and we need to say no more often. I definitely needed this.
So I'm curious, why specifically did you pick this book?
I picked this, there's a little bit of an alternative motive maybe, in that I am a recovering people pleaser, and I love solving problems, and it doesn't matter if they're mine or someone else's. And the trouble with that is whenever someone has a problem and I'm aware of it, my instinct is to go fix. And although that's a very good instinct to have in a lot of scenarios, especially the world that I've decided to work in, it's very easy to become overwhelmed. And that's something that I'm working through right now with some of the goals that I've got on my 12-week year with Josh on theoretical. I'm working through some of that with him. I've just got a lot going on, and I'm trying to fine-tune that into where I should be, learning where to say no so that I know where to say yes.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. I think that going into this book, it wasn't exactly what I anticipated. I really enjoyed it. We'll get into the specifics here, but I can definitely see this being the type of title that would jump out to you if you're feeling overwhelmed by everything that you've said yes to. But I also feel like the information that they provided here is not necessarily stuff that is going to fix your problem overnight, which is, I guess, not implicitly.
That's what I was hoping.
Yeah, exactly. It's not implicitly said in the title, but it's the kind of thing that, like, you see the title and you're like, oh, this I need.
Right.
And it wasn't exactly that. It was really good information, but it was more general stuff that I thought than just like, okay, this is what I need to do right now to fix everything that's wrong in my life.
Yeah, I would agree. It was very different than what I was expecting. I was expecting, I guess, a little bit more of, here's how to say no, and here's what that will create for you. Like, that's kind of what I was expecting, and that's kind of in there, but it the more I went through it, the more I realized this is about the process of saying no and the nuances that can come in the process of saying no. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's a very good description. I totally agree. And honestly, this was kind of a hard one to outline for Bookworm. In fact, just a couple minutes ago, I was moving stuff around on the outline.
And I didn't even add anything to what you put here because I didn't know what to
add. Because it's broken down in a kind of interesting way. There's essentially like 9 chapters in the beginning part of it, where they're broken down into different sections, like prepare, where the 3 things under there are uncover your yes, empower your no, respect your way to yes. Then there's the deliver, where you express your yes, assert your no, propose a yes, and we'll get into the formula here in a little bit. And then follow through, where you stay true to your yes, you underscore your no, and then you negotiate to yes. But the real value of this book to me was a lot of the little things that were kind of hidden in there. This William definitely likes lists. So
yep.
I teased out, like, I've got a MindNode file, and one of the separate branches that I have is for these 3 benefits of a positive no, which was, I felt like, not super prominent in the book, but is also one of the most valuable pieces of it. And so real quickly, the 3 benefits of a positive no, according to the book: you can create what you want, you can protect what you value, and you can change what no longer works. And I think what's really appealing to me about this is that the 3 benefits of a positive no, what they do is they allow you to control the narrative. They allow you to control your own story, and you're in control of the outcome. So you get to decide what you want. You get to decide what you value. You get to change the things that no longer work. But in order to do that, you need to be able to say no.
And I think I agree with you with the constant list making, and it always kills me whenever people start doing a list and then do a list within the list, because I have a tendency to want to, and maybe this is just me and my own issues, but I have a tendency to want to memorize these things whenever there's a list of things, because I feel like I should be able to retain that, and it's a good framework, so I should know how it works. Like take getting things done, for example, that whole 5-step process, like I can quote that to you. But that's what I tend to want to do with these. And when there are a number of lists and lists within lists of lists and on it goes, it's impossible for me to memorize all those, and I get frustrated by it. Whereas the base framework that he poses, the yes, no, yes, now that I know I will never forget, but I always want to memorize all these things.
Yeah, and it's really difficult for me, I guess, because I've switched the way that I take notes for these books, and I've just been using a MindNode file, and so I've got a mind map of all these different things. And it's great for getting information down because I can real quickly identify, oh, these are the quotes, these are the discussion points, these are the action items. But if I get something that I feel is really important, I can just create a new node off of the main branch. Like I've got a picture of the book in the middle, so I could just create a new major note if there's something that really jumps out to me, like those 3 benefits of a positive no. But when it comes time to create an actual outline, I've got all these different pieces, and like you said, it's hard to. My brain doesn't like having these all over the place. It's like these need to be in order.
Yes,
and I have essentially, based on my MindNode file here, no idea what that order actually is anymore.
Yeah, I tend to, and we need to do, like, we should just get this on the calendar after this episode, how we read books, and just do a bonus episode. We just need to do this. But I have a tendency to want to summarize a book. Like, that's one thing that I've learned I'm really good at, is boiling things down to a single or a couple points. That's one of my strong suits. And I always want to do that with a book. And when there's a lot of separate points, which is and a lot of sub points that are very powerful, like what you're saying, the 3 benefits of a positive no, like that's something I don't even remember seeing that in here. And
yeah,
yet it was extremely impactful for you. Like those types of things I want to be able to tease out, but when there's lists and lists and lists, and you've got all these different outlines within the outlines, it's really hard to do that because you just don't know where the central point is sometimes.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And that's kind of going back to the very beginning where you shared the quote by Mortimer Adler sent in by Roger Bussell. That quote, like that encapsulates my approach to books. Like if all I got out of The Power of a Positive No was that one section on the 3 benefits of a positive no, that's still worth it. And that was literally, I think, 3 pages out of the book. It was towards the end, if I remember right. I didn't write down exactly where I got it from. But I want to give myself the freedom to have those revelation points and not be so concerned about having to make sure that I encapsulate like the rough outline of what the author has actually said in the book, if that makes sense.
It does.
It's that honestly to me is pretty stressful. Like to be able to, it's almost like approaching it as a test where it's like, we're going to measure how much of this you comprehend based on the quality of your outline. And I would prefer to have the freedom, and it's actually very liberating to have the freedom to just say, okay, I'm going to read this, and whatever jumps out at me. I'm not going to try and recreate the outline that the author used when they wrote this in the first place.
Now, one of the benefits that you and I have that most people don't have is if we want to review a book, like say I wanted to go back and see what I think about The Power of a Positive No in, say, 6 months, I can come back to Bookworm and listen to the episode that we recorded about it and get my fresh take on it again. So that's something that I can do and you can do, but most cannot. So I think that's helpful because we're kind of creating our own little archive, but making it public.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually really cool because just the other day I was talking to somebody and they're asking me like, what did you think about the checklist manifesto? I'm like, I liked it a lot. Wasn't what I was expecting. Like, oh, what do you mean? I'm like, well, I thought it was going to be like straight up productivity advice, but there's a lot of medical terminology in there, but I still really enjoyed it. And then I was thinking about it, as I was talking to him on Slack, and I'm like, hey, actually, if you want the long version of my thoughts, here's the Bookworm episode on it.
There you go.
So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's kind of nice to be able to send a link to somebody and say, hey, when on your next commute in, listen to this. If you want my full thoughts on this, go for this.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so we talked about the 3 benefits of a positive no. The next one that I put on here, and this is kind of a weird order, I guess, but it makes sense in my brain, so I'll
That's okay, I can jump around.
Okay, cool. So the 3 benefits of the positive no, and then he talks about tension, which is caused from this internal struggle that we have between exercising the power that we have available to us and tending to the relationship of the other person. And that's where the positive no idea comes in, because there's essentially 3 different traditional responses whenever somebody asks you to do something. You can accommodate, attack, or avoid. So accommodate is when you say yes when you really want to say no. Attack is when you just flat out say no, or you say no poorly, you snap at the person, you hurt the relationship in essence. I've definitely been guilty of this in the past. And then the third one is avoid. This one drives me crazy. I hate it when people do this. I ask them to do something and they just never get back to you. They say nothing at all. And I'm like, just tell me no. That's okay.
Just say you can't do it. I've been running a 99 Designs thing here lately, and I tend to ask for things that I know are on the edge of what you can and can't do with a design. And I keep asking them, it's like, if this is going to take it too far and it's not going to look okay, just tell me it's not smart. And no one there will ever tell me no. I'm like, come on, push me.
Yeah, 99 Designs is an interesting example, because that whole model, I feel, is based on having to say yes, where you say yes, you submit your design, and you don't even guarantee that you get paid for it, because the client, you in this case, is going to pick the one that they like the best. So you're incentivized to do more work, put more time in, and then in the end, you may not get anything for it anyways.
Yeah, what I have learned is if I want to take a design really far, I need to select like the base layout that I like the best and the designer who can respond quickly. And if I find someone who is in that and those two are combined, I tend to carry them, and then they're more than willing to spend more time on it later as opposed to up front, because they have more of that guarantee that they're actually going to get paid for it. So if you're running a 99 Designs thing, do that. Don't get too caught up in the first round.
Another resource, by the way, since we're speaking about design, I saw this thing. I've not signed up for this, but I'm very intrigued by it. It is called Design Pickle. Have you heard of this?
I have not. What is this?
This is $370 a month, and you get unlimited designs. Now, I don't know exactly how that works, and I don't know how quickly they turn them around or how good the designs are, but essentially it's like a on-demand creative agency. So for somebody like you who needs a design every once in a while for this thing, it's a lot less expensive and a lot lower risk than actually like hiring a graphic designer, for example, for your company to crank out these designs, or even paying per job if you're going to have multiple jobs. If you have to make designs over and over and over again, whether it be icons for a web interface or whatever, having somebody essentially that you can just send stuff to, and then they've got a team and they'll crank it out and get you the assets that you need. That's kind of cool, actually.
That is interesting. I just pulled this up to look through it. I could see, like, if I wanted to, like, if I had a website of sorts that was much bigger, that I was trying to always doing like custom ads or custom graphics that were regular, I could see that being a big deal. Because then you're not hiring an actual designer. Huh, interesting.
Yeah, because I've not had good experiences with 99 Designs. And obviously the other option would be like Fiverr, and those you're going to get garbage guaranteed. So yeah. I think but 99 Designs, I think there's like, it's $100 or something, right? Once you pick the one that you like.
It's $300 to kick it off.
Okay, yeah. So it's pretty expensive. I mean, for a month, if you had multiple designs that you wanted to do, then Design Pickle sounds like a pretty good option. I don't believe there's a contract required with that. I think it's just month to month.
Interesting. Yeah, $370 a month per user. Interesting. Yeah, no, I've had good luck with 99 Designs in the past. And that might be because I'm fairly... It also helps that my wife, who I've been affectionately calling Wonder Woman lately, is very design-oriented. So I tend to talk these things through with her, and that helps me get better designs out of it because I can give the feedback from a designer's terminology, I guess. So that helps me quite a bit on that, and I've had some really good luck doing that.
Yeah, that would definitely be a good asset to have. Maybe that was the the failure point for me.
Yeah. Anyway, there you go. There's our little goat trail on design.
Yeah, so that actually, like, again, brought it up because I think it's an example of the accommodate response, and one of the reasons why I personally don't like client work, because once you sign the contract, you got to do it. It's hard to say, no, I'm not going to do this, and let's do this instead. And sometimes, you can do that if it's stipulated in the contract. Like, I'm going to do this, and then the client, obviously project creep, they want something above and beyond that, to have to say, well, we can do that, but it's going to cost additional funds. Like, that conversation alone, I don't like having. But even just the scope of the contract, I don't like the open-ended, open to interpretation definition of what is actually going to get done when you create something. So Definitely not for me. But the formula for a positive no is a combination of two of these. So accommodate, where you say yes when you want to say no. Attack, say no poorly, or avoid, say nothing at all. The formula for a positive no is a combination of accommodate and attack, which I think was a really cool way of framing this. Putting those three different types of responses first helped me really understand this yes, no, yes formula for a positive no, which you alluded to earlier. And because it's not going to come across in audio format, the formula is yes with an exclamation point, no with a period, and then yes with a question mark. So I guess it would be yes, no, yes.
Well done there.
And if you were to break this down, the first yes, this is saying yes to yourself. And this is the thing that has really clicked for me with this 12-week year session. And again, like, not been doing it very long. I'm also coming off of a week up north where I did not even have internet access. We had no cell phone coverage. Like, it was great. I was completely disconnected. So check with me next week.
I love that you follow that up with, it was great.
It was. I like being connected. I like technology, but I also like to get away from it once in a while. And so the 4th of July, we go to this house on the lake, and for whatever reason, like, it's in the woods, and this particular house, like, you cannot get cell phone coverage there. You go out the front door 10 feet and you get LTE, but in the house, there's nothing. There's no Wi-Fi, whatever. It's a nice house, but it's just...
They have metal walls. It blocks all signals.
They do have there's a big log cabin, and it's got a metal roof. So I'm sure that's part of it.
Ah, there you go. That'll do it.
But it's really nice. And coming back to civilization, I guess, back into the normal swing of things, embracing this 12-week year model with this journal, what it has allowed me to do and given me the support and the mental scaffolding to help me stick with is to say yes to myself. This sounds so simple. I get that. You're listening to this and you're like, Mike, you teach about morning rituals. Like, how how is this revelation to you? I can't explain it, but the morning rituals that I have always had in the past have not had the impact that this one has had. So I don't know if it's just the right combinations of things, or like I said, I've got this journal now, which I really enjoy. So it's helping me stay on the right path. But saying yes to yourself at the beginning of the day, especially, super, super important. And I think that is kind of coming across in this formula. Like there's a reason that you say yes to yourself first. If you don't, it's the whole concept of budgeting. If you don't pay yourself first, you're not going to pay yourself. They say that Dave Ramsey, give every dollar a job. Well, the order that you give those dollars a job is important. If you don't save for the kids' college fund at the beginning or save for your retirement at the beginning, before you pay all of your bills, then what you will find at the end is that you've run out of dollars. You've went ahead and bought a shiny new MacBook, and now you don't have.
This is why you save for these things, so that when you're in my scenario, you don't have to worry about it.
Right. But that's what allows you to do that, is when you save for the MacBook and you set that money aside and you don't spend it on overpriced coffee like me, then you can say, if you say yes to that thing initially, then what it does is it gives you the freedom, and your dollars in essence are stretched further. Like you don't waste them on frivolous things. I think the same thing can be said about your energy in terms of the power of a positive no, where if you are saying yes to yourself first, that is a very key piece, and it really opens the door for the second part of this, where you do say no. Do you agree, disagree?
Yeah, I think so, because it really frames your own mind. Because if I'm going to share a no with someone, I need to know that there is something you're saying yes to. So for every no, there's a yes. And for every yes, there's a no. Like it goes back and forth. Every time you say yes to one thing, you're declining to do a different thing. So you have to affirm, here's what I'm saying yes to, before you can deliver that no. Once you get through the process of affirming yourself, that's when you're essentially saying yes to yourself, and you got the balance between the two. So once you get through that, when you're talking to the person you're saying no, that's when you deliver the no. And part of the reason it has the period on it is because it needs to be a period. Like it's not a question mark no. It's this is the no. So continue.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that leads into the last part of it, which is the yes with the question mark, where you're saying no to the specific thing that somebody is asking, but you're proposing another solution, which is kind of meeting in the middle, in essence. You're protecting your interests, but you're also accommodating to a certain degree the interests of the other person. It's the balance between having the authority to say, no, I'm not going to do this, and also tending to the relationship.
Yes, because whenever you're posing that question at the end, you're essentially giving a path forward, as opposed to just saying, if you just stop on the no, it really puts things in their tracks, and it doesn't offer the relationship any way to move forward. You're just kind of making everything run into a brick wall, and that's not what you want to do. Like you're essentially trying to find a way to resolve the issue, whatever that issue is. So you always need to think through, like, what is the path forward, and what is it that we want to do in order to move that situation forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like the way that you define that as like the path forward, essentially. And what's interesting about this, and the next point on the outline, is this whole idea about the core beliefs. Because if you don't have your core beliefs, or I would call them core values, what that does is that provides the framework for you to say your first yes. Okay, this is who we are, this is what we do. And so in that context, it's a lot easier to say yes or no to things, because we can compartmentalize the ask essentially as being in line with our core beliefs or not being in line with our core beliefs. If it's not in line with our core beliefs, then we say no. And if it is in line with our core beliefs, then that can actually dictate a yes, even when sometimes we want to say no. So one of the examples that he shares is the Tylenol recall, and I don't remember this event specifically. Like I remember hearing about it, but essentially the Tylenol was faced with an employee that had decided they hated the company, whatever, and they had essentially poisoned the pills. And they sent these out, and it was a small batch, but Tylenol recalled everything because they didn't want anybody to get sick. And they made this decision, and according to the book, they mentioned that they made this decision according to the Tylenol credo, which is we believe our first responsibilities to the doctors, nurses, and patients, to mothers and fathers, and all those who use our products and services. So they viewed the decision, should we recall all of the Tylenol that was made in the last whatever time period, which would cost millions of dollars, should we do that or not? It was a no-brainer because their core belief was we want every single person that uses our products, we want their lives to be better. And our responsibility is to them first, not to our stockholders, not to the bottom line of the profitability of the company. Now, contrast that with the Samsung Galaxy Note 7 debacle.
Okay? I was thinking the exact same scenario.
Yeah, and this just gets my blood boiling every time I think about this. Okay, I understand that you can have production issues. Okay, so Samsung Galaxy Note 7s, they rolled them out and they exploded. And they said, no, it's not our problem. There's really nothing here. So they continued to explode. Finally, they admitted there is a problem. We'll recall these. It's just a small batch of batteries. We'll fix these phones. They fixed it. They continued to explode. They recalled all the phones. They replaced all the batteries. They continued to explode. So finally, they're getting all of this negative press. You go to the airport, still to this day, they will say, if you have a Galaxy Note 7, do not get on this plane. Okay?
Right, because there's even places where you can exchange them now, if I understand. In certain airports, like if you have one of the old ones, you can like put it in this machine and it does all the stuff to move your data over and you get it back. I think that's the way these things work. But there's like this kiosk where you can swap them out.
Yeah, exactly. So it's well known at this point that these are not safe devices, that they need to be gotten rid of, right? Like we can all agree on that? No.
I think so.
No, we can't, because just the other day, I'm going to paste this link in Zencastr. They announced that they are reselling the reclaimed Galaxy Note 7s as the Galaxy Note Fan Edition. Are you kidding me? I mean, if you're not driven by profits, then what are you driven by? I mean, the phone is literally exploding next to people's heads, and you continue to sell this after I can't even count how many times that they've gotten negative press for this. At one point, they had all of the reclaimed batteries in a warehouse, and the warehouse exploded. Like, guys, seriously, do you want... This is going to follow them for years. I mean, this could literally be a thing that... This is the type of thing, I'm not saying that this is actually going to happen to Samsung, but this is the type of thing that could put a company like this out of business if you don't handle this thing the right way. And I feel that they have mismanaged this every single step along the way.
Well, have they officially issued a recall? That was the thing that got me, is they would replace them, but they never officially issued a recall, if I remember right.
I think they were recalled, but I know they rolled out a software update which bricked the phones. They essentially made the batteries completely unusable. And so even if my understanding, again, I'm not a Samsung fan to begin with, but this is just, for all of the Samsung versus Apple stuff, like, can you imagine Apple mismanaging, like if this had happened to the iPhone, like Apple wouldn't be around anymore. That people would like to kill Apple because they added a feature, or they took away a feature, or they took away the headphone jack. Like, that's a much more minor thing than your phone blowing up in somebody's ear. And yet that happened like not once, not twice, not three times. Like, it happened over and over and over and over and over again. And Samsung has repeatedly said, like, well, we don't really care about the health of our customers. We're going to continue to roll these phones out because this costs us a lot of money. I mean, that's not explicitly what they're saying, but it's what they're saying by their actions.
Right. They chose to say, to bring us all back, they chose to say yes to profits and said no to safety of their customers. So again, they're saying yes and no respectively to different things, but in this case, it's done in a way that is not delivered well or people strongly disagree with. Like, you want your profits versus the safety of my head. Okay.
Yeah. And I think that the reason that I point this out, because I think it's interesting, and I don't know this for sure, but I am going to project that if you were to look at Samsung's mission statement or whatever, because every company's got one, it's probably not profit above all. Okay? That doesn't really read very well.
It's also likely not reviewed regularly.
Exactly. This Tylenol credo, somebody in some meeting said, this is our credo. Do we believe in this? If so, this is the obvious decision. That obviously didn't happen with Samsung. And again, I did not look up the Samsung mission statement, but even if their mission statement is, we exist to make everybody's lives better through technology, and we put the safety and the health of our customers and suppliers above everything else. Like, that's great that you've said that, but if it doesn't really guide your decisions, if it doesn't frame your yes, no, yes, then what good is it? And I've mentioned we've got core values for our family, but this is kind of a reminder for me that, like, we have to keep reviewing those things. We have to keep saying those things so that our kids understand that, so that they actually make their decisions framed off of this. The fact that we have them printed and on the wall is not good enough.
I looked it up. So Samsung's mission/vision statement, which if you go to the page for this, it looks like a blank page. I'm going to link to this, but you go to, what is it? Samsung.com/US/about Samsung/corporate profile/vision mission.html. Like, they don't want you to find this, apparently. You go to that page. There's like a menu bar on the left going up and down, and a menu across the top, and a sub menu underneath that. And then there's this big white spot. And there's also a menu at the bottom. So they got menus everywhere and a white space in the middle. You scroll down and you can get Vision 2020, which is, as stated in its new motto, Samsung Electronics' vision for the new decade is inspire the world, create the future. There you go. Whatever that means.
Yeah. So from a productivity perspective, I would say that that's actually not a good mission statement because it's not very specific. But again, I'm not running a multi-billion-dollar company, so it is what it is. But from what I've understood of there's a really good book called Scaling Up by Vern Harnish, I believe. It's the new version of the Rockefeller Habits. And This is a framework that we use with Asian efficiency, and it's phenomenal. I absolutely love it. There's a bunch of worksheets and things where essentially you can kind of do your quarterly planning. And you walk through and you identify these are your core values. You identify these are your targets. You can very clearly articulate, if we have a really good quarter, this is what it looks like. If we don't do so well this quarter, this is what it looks like. And you have these different ranges. So you can really measure stuff very easily. And you tie it all back to your brand promise and your core values. And something very vague, like what you found on the Samsung page, if there's no other description about it, it's hard to attach to that. And I think that the value comes from when everybody in the company, and this is kind of following a scaling up model, like what you want is you want a small company where you really buy into this mission, everybody's super passionate about it, and it shows, and then that spreads as the company grows, and that's where the whole scaling up idea comes, but you don't lose the vision. And if all you had was 6 words in your vision, and there's no other context there, I think it's really easy to lose that.
Yeah, I should say there is more context there, but it's corporate speak. Like, they're talking about
exactly
3 key strengths: new technology, innovative products, creative solutions. Like, it's all words without saying anything. So yeah, and then here you go. As part of this vision, Samsung has mapped out a specific plan of reaching $400 billion in revenue and becoming one of the world's top 5 brands by 2020. Okay, so dollars are a part of this, apparently.
There you go. Then they're acting according to their core beliefs, and can't fault them for that. It is what it is. That's fine. I don't agree, but somebody somewhere does. So different strokes for different folks. That kind of leads into the next point here, though, where, and again, this is, I guess, just my personal mindset. So the whole idea of Samsung's corporate motto, like their vision being driven by profit, is kind of appalling to me. But there's a quote in here that I teased out, which I really, really liked. It said, "You give respect because of who you are, not because of who they are." So in the Samsung example, in the Tylenol example, I think that's two different versions of how this specifically played out. And I can totally see how I have embraced the wrong mindset with this in the past. So a lot of people think like you have to earn respect. But this was one of the big takeaways for me, was that no, you give respect based on your character, not on the character of the person that you are interacting with, if that makes sense.
I've always thought of respect as like there's two different kinds of respect. One is I respect you because you are human, like there are basic human needs and things. Like you should respect a person because they are a person. And then there's the level of respect that, I guess the stereotype would be soldiers having respect for their commander. Like there's that level of respect as well. And the former of those two is one that everyone deserves. The latter of those two is the one that's earned. That's how I think of it. I don't know if that's the right way to think of it, but it's at least how I separate those two.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. For me, one of my action items was show respect to others before responding. So my definition of respect, which I don't have word for word, but it's basically show respect regardless of the person who is asking you to do the thing. I think this has been one of the things that has tripped me up in the past is I've responded attacking by saying no poorly. And if you show respect to the other person, you can't attack. You can't say no poorly. It forces you to frame the no positively. And so I guess for me, when I think of this, show respect to others before responding, it's acknowledging who they are and what they are asking before just saying flippantly, no, I'm not going to do that, sort of a thing.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And I think this is where your phrase of giving respect because of who you are as opposed to like not because of who they are, that makes a lot of sense, because if you're going to show respect when you're saying no to that other person, like take for example, if someone else is going to tell me no, this is the way I would want them to do that, because it doesn't come across as attacking. It doesn't come across as something I have done per se. It may be something I've done, but that's not going to be their focus if they're using this process. But it's a way for them to affirm something that's important to them, show respect to me to show that, this is important enough to them that they need to say no to the thing I'm doing, and then pose how to move forward from there. So they have to show me respect in that way. Like that's just natural in that sense whenever it's posed that way, because they're showing me why, essentially. And I'm, this is something I really resonate with because I'm a why person. Like if you're going to explain something to me and you want me to do something, if you can explain why, I'm much better off in the long run. So I think that's what you're getting at with the respect piece, because it's something that is natural in the way that yes, no, yes formula works.
Exactly. And as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself that it all boils down to the golden rule. We teach our kids, like, treat other people the way you want to be treated. Exactly. But it really is that simple if you really think about it.
We got a whole book here on, treat others the way you want to be treated. There you go.
Yeah. That probably wouldn't become a New York Times bestseller, though. So,
not
or in
likely,
this case, no. I guess an international bestseller. So,
true that.
But the next point on this outline, it kind of relates to this, and that is that no is not a wall. It is a living boundary which protects what is important. So I think I've viewed no previously as a wall. Like I've talked about you got to put up boundaries. You got to protect the things that are important to you. If you want to spend time with your family, then turn off your phone at dinner time so you don't get the emails and the text messages about stuff that's happening at the office.
Or better yet, leave it in a different room.
Exactly. But kind of what I've recognized from this book is that approach is maybe necessary at the very beginning. Like if you find yourself in a situation where you're just constantly connected and something has to change immediately, then you may have to say, no, I'm just not going to do that anymore. But the better approach is showing respect to the other person and framing it positively, which takes more time, but the end result is a lot better. If you show respect and you don't just say, nope, not going to do that anymore, but you actually do, you say yes to yourself, then you say no to the thing, and then you propose a different solution. Like I said, that does take more time, but that living boundary, then what that ends up looking like, if I were to sketch this out, I view like the hard wall as just like a box. And you can draw the box. There's 4 straight walls, 90-degree angles, and that's okay. But the better version of that is this living boundary, which ends up taking all these different shapes, and it may actually look something like a human cell, where it's got all of these different edges and rounded corners and whatever, and that allows it to fit into different spaces, and that allows you to encapsulate inside of there the things that are super important, but also it allows you a lot more flexibility in terms of fitting in with all of the other desires and things that need to be done with all the other people that you work with, all the other teams that you're involved in. Does that make sense? I'm not sure I explained that very well.
It's a bit tricky to get your head around, I think, because whenever you say no to someone, when you say it's a living boundary, you're essentially saying this is a place that we can't cross because of X, Y, and Z. Like, I cannot go meet a friend of mine for dinner every night, Thursday night, because he's going through a rough time. I just can't do that because I've got family things that take priority over that. And that's where the living boundary thing comes in, I think, because you have a core value, or a core belief, as we're using the term here. Like, there's something important to me, my family, and what that family needs from me is that core belief. And whenever there's another request that comes in, I need to say no to show what that boundary is and where that wall is in that specific scenario. But that where that line is may be different depending on the specific situation.
Yeah.
Does that encompass it?
I believe so. So let's just use like the Thursday night example. So you could say your core belief is that family time is important, and you've carved out the time on Thursday night as your family night. That's great. Like, that's, as a general rule, you're not going to say yes to anything on Thursday night because you've said yes to family time previously. I guess what I'm saying with the living boundary thing, though, is that the tendency for me in the past would be to, every time that someone would ask me to do something then on a Thursday night, just say no. Okay. Don't propose an alternative. Just say, no, I don't do that. Okay. You've established your limits, but there's no invitation to reach the agreement. And now in your specific example where you mentioned you got a friend who's going through a tough time or whatever, the living boundary to me is keeping the conversation open, saying no respectably, and saying, well, as a general rule, I can't do this on Thursdays, but I know that, I've got to talk you off the ledge tonight and you're important to me, so I'm going to make an exception just this once. Now, obviously, there is a danger there because once you make the exception once, you've opened the door to that thing happening over and over and over again, regardless of what it is. And so it's really important to stay grounded in your yes, the first yes, the yes with the exclamation point, saying yes to yourself. But I think that as long as you stay grounded and you are constantly evaluating based off of your core beliefs, am I spending enough time with my kids, for example, or with my family, then that gives you flexibility to where the week doesn't necessarily look the same every time. You don't always have to do the family time on Thursday night. You just always have to make sure that you have the family time. Does that make sense?
Yes. I think that's what I'm trying to get at is you can have differing circumstances in the same scenario. I think.
Yeah.
I think
exactly.
that comes across the way I
there
wanted
will be there will be exceptions. You can say as a general rule, I get up at 6 a.m. I do my morning ritual, and then I'm working at 7 and plan out your entire day. But what happens when you are sick or whatever? You oversleep a little bit, and now does your whole day get thrown off? No, not necessarily. You can adapt and you can overcome because. I had this. I had literally had this happen this morning, where I didn't sleep real well last night, and I didn't wake up when I wanted to. But I followed this formula still, because regardless of even though I woke up like half hour, 45 minutes later than I wanted to, I still made sure that I handled my morning ritual before I did anything else, and that meant that some work stuff that I had intended to get done before we recorded this didn't get done. I'm going to have to do that later in the day. But that's okay. I mean, if you're overcommitted and you've got a bunch of different things and your day is just packed, and then that 45 minutes, that's enough to throw your entire day off, that is a problem. I recognize that some people have that sort of schedule, and some days my schedule is like that. But that, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that's the approach that is dangerous with this book, I think, is you can kind of be like, oh, I'm in this situation, I got to cut this stuff out. This book is going to show me how, and I'm not going to have to have those difficult conversations. That's not necessarily the case. But what is of value in this book, at least to me, is the formula for kind of once you've got that margin established already, it's the framework for keeping the thing going and making sure that the boundaries are appropriate. It's not some magic pill where you're going to snap your fingers after reading this book and all of a sudden your schedule's cleared up and you've got 4 extra hours of free time every day. But I would argue that what it does give you is actually much more valuable than that.
Yeah, I could see how you could get into that. I don't know that I took it that way in any, I didn't see this as a golden bullet. But at the same time, I also have a good base of knowing that there's not a single book that's going to solve a bunch of problems. So I don't tend to see books in that way. But I know that some people do. I'm just not one of them. So if you come at this book thinking it's going to solve some of, a lot of your problems, just know that you actually have to implement the things that are in it. So it's not going to do that just by reading it. You actually have to get to work. Sorry to burst the bubble there for
right.
Anybody who thought that.
I guess maybe a better way to describe it would be the tendency can be looking at the title to think like, oh, this book is going to help me say no better. But actually what it does is it helps you say yes better. So The actual act of saying no, you still have to figure out. They give you the formula for a positive no, but that the hump there, I think, is being able to say no, period, especially if you're a people pleaser.
Yeah, and that would be the direction I almost took it mentally, was because the power of a positive no, you could say, well, this is a way for me to say yes and still get the no across without having to say no. That's what I would love for it to be. And it would be very easy to get to that conclusion if you're a yes person whenever you see the title of this. But again, you have to be very, very firm with that no in the middle of the yeses.
Yep, definitely. I completely agree. But the way that he describes Plan B in this book is interesting, and I think it really encapsulates what the whole book is about. He describes Plan B as an alternate means of success, not a worst-case scenario, which when I picked up the book, that's kind of what I expected, was like the power of a positive no. This was a way to clear the things that I was committed to, but really what it does is it allows you to shift your commitments a little bit more in favor of the direction of this is something that I want, as opposed to accommodating what other people want, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, and this is where he gets into some of that curve of acceptance. I notice you've got that down here, because there are different levels at which people will accept your no, and you have to be willing at any point in time to resort to your plan B, assuming that you've taken the time to determine what that plan B is. And that's something that you need to do, because it's freeing to know what you're going to default to if they don't accept your no. like say you're in a business negotiation and you need to say no to some of what they want in the middle of that negotiation. If you know what your fallback is, if they don't agree to it, you tend to have a lot more confidence in how you're delivering it. And that by itself can change the way that the conversation goes. But that curve of acceptance, and I don't have it in front of me, Mike, but it essentially takes people from the process of hearing you out, not accepting your no at all, and then flowing through the process of being angry with you over that, being sad that you're saying no, and then eventually accepting that and being willing to move forward from that. I don't have it in front of me. Maybe you.
Yeah, it's avoidance, leads to denial, leads to anxiety, leads to anger, leads to bargaining, leads to sadness, leads to acceptance. And it's totally true. Like I can think of a specific situation in my own life where this is playing out right now. And the end result I know is going to be better. Like we're going to find some happy medium where everybody wins. But it can be difficult getting to that point. And that's where the power of a positive to know there's a lot of value in this, is that there's two parties obviously involved here. There's you and the other party. So what can happen is one of three different things. They can understand and respect your interests, and you cannot. And if that's the case, that's probably, if you were to say ignorance is bliss, this is the one scenario where that might actually be true, because maybe you've got a boss who is telling you got to go home at 5 o'clock every day. Like there are situations like that. There's also the flip side of that where you respect your own interests and opinions, but the other person does not. And that is where the tendency can be to attack and say no poorly. And this is getting back to you give respect because of who you are, not because of who they are. You can say, oh, this jerk, they don't even understand what they just asked for. You know, they don't deserve a thought out response. I could just say no. You can, but that's not the best way to handle it either. And that is where the curve of acceptance comes in. Like if you, especially for people that you interact with frequently, I believe you need to move people along this curve of acceptance slowly, but the process is worth it in the end, because what you will end up with is the ideal scenario where you and the other party both understand each other's needs, wants, opinions, whatever, and you figured out a way that you can work together where everybody wins. But it takes a lot of work to get to that point.
And that comes back to tending to the relationship. You know, we talked about the tension of exercising power because you're angry or whatever to share that no just because you want to and show that, yes, you can say no in that scenario. It's probably really easy to do with kids, but tending to the relationship is taking people through that process, that curve. And I think if we stopped and thought about it, we could see how we're in the middle of that curve in a number of scenarios with our children. So, because that's like the key thing that kids, I feel, teach you is how to say no and how to help them learn through that process, even though they're doing things you don't want them to do.
Yeah. You know, the entire time that I was reading this book and understanding meditation, I was thinking of the conversation that we had with Josh. And he's talking about, well, what does that look like with your kids? And I'm recognizing that in a lot of ways, I've been acting like a big kid. On page 47, he says in this book, this is one of the things that jumped out to me. Maybe it's just because I've, quote unquote, discovered meditation and mindfulness or whatever. But it says there are no intrinsically negative emotions, only negatively charged emotions, which have the potential to become positively charged. So I've tried to take that approach in how I interact with my kids, especially with discipline. Now, we are, according to worldly standards, I guess, very strict. But still, like, I don't want there to be just the power-based no's. That's another action item for me. Like, I'd never want to say, no, you can't do that. Why? Because I said so. You know, but when I think about it, like, I can identify a lot of different times in the past where I've taken that same approach, not just with my kids, but in how I've interacted with other people, the way that I've said no to things. And recognizing, being mindful of the fact that maybe this emotion is negatively charged, but why is it negatively charged? That's what mindfulness is all about, is identifying the root causes, figuring out the pain points, and then solving them. But recognizing that this thing is happening. Let's not say that this thing is awful and, oh, woe is me, but let's just look at this objectively. What's really going on here? And when you do that with kids, it's if you're able to achieve that little bit of distance, it completely changes the dynamic of the discipline at that particular moment. You know, we've all probably heard the saying, like, don't discipline when you're angry, but it's surprisingly easy for that anger to seep into discipline, especially when you have stereotypical boys like I do, who just sometimes are just not gonna listen. You can say the same thing 6, 7, 8 times. They'll look at you in the face and just in one ear and out the other. And that's not their fault.
And it's frustrating.
It is frustrating. Exactly. It's a negatively charged emotion that I'm feeling at that particular time. But the whole idea behind discipline is not just punishment. It's not, okay, you did this, now you're going to suffer the consequences. So I think that this is one instance in particular where the negatively charged emotion has the potential to become a positively charged. It can become a positive situation where they are able to learn the correct way to do this thing, or the reason why, you have to look the waitress in the eye when she asks you a question when we're out to eat, that sort of thing. The tendency in the past has been to just get angry. Like, what's wrong with you? We talked about this before. Why can't you answer? Look her in the face. But yeah, I think I've kind of had a revelation of that, where every single opportunity, I guess, to discipline can be to transform a negative into a positive.
Yes, to all the things. A lot of good stuff there. Do you want to cover this goodwill account thing?
Yeah, there's not a whole lot to talk about here, but it sounded a lot like Stephen Covey's emotional bank account. And it's just kind of interesting that this was brought up again. And I really liked it when we read it in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I really like it here as well. What he talks about on page 229 with the goodwill account is that you have to build up goodwill in order to say no. And this is really important, I think, because that whole curve of acceptance, what you want at the end of that is not acceptance of Mike's going to be weird and do his own thing, but acceptance of, I really respect Mike and he's got a reason for doing this. Even if I don't completely understand it right now, I know that he's not going to screw me over, sort of a thing. And this is another thing that I think this was one of my action items when I talked about the Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it's something that I don't have a takeaway specifically for this or an action item for this, but it's a reminder, and it's something that's kind of just like a mindset I've tried to adopt is, and it's kind of coupled with the showing respect to other people before responding. Consistently putting into the goodwill account, consistently making positive deposits instead of negative withdrawals. And I think that opens up a whole lot of doors and opportunities to say no and then reach a yes solution that benefits both parties.
If you ever listen to the Dave Ramsey show, he talks about this on occasion whenever he gets a caller that calls in and say they have a strained relationship with their parents, but their parents are doing something with finances that they feel is destructive and they need to stop. And one of Dave's questions, or, he'll tell them, can you just talk to them about this? And he typically follows that up with, you can't go tell them no, you can't go have these hard conversations if you haven't tried to build into them in some way, in a positive way, to build some of that respect that we were talking about earlier. If you haven't built some of that history and built some of that trust, you can't deliver a no effectively. Because they're going to, like you were saying with your kids, sometimes that'll just go in one ear and one out and out the other. It's a little bit of a different situation, but it's the same concept that if you don't have a solid and, in a lot of cases, heartfelt relationship with someone, you can't deliver that no without it causing pain in that relationship.
Yeah, totally agree. Dave Ramsey is an interesting guy. I didn't actually meet him, but I saw him. I went to an Entre Leadership one day event down in Chicago. And
nice.
if you've ever gone through Financial Peace University, one of the things my wife and I always laughed about is like he runs out on stage and he like jumps up and down and he does like the fist bump thing, does the same thing. It's got to be like 20 years later, but he does the same exact thing. He's kind of a goober, but I like his message.
Cool. You want to jump into action items?
Let's do it.
You got a bunch here.
I do. Now, these are all somewhat related. Really, if you were to boil this down, what it looks like is say no effectively, say no correctly, and not attack. But I mentioned a couple of them already. So some of the specific things: I want to show respect to others before responding. I want to not use power-based no's. I do not want to say no without proposing a yes. When I do propose a yes, I want to frame it positively. And I also want to use the phrase, I would prefer not to, when saying no. This could backfire, I realize, but he mentions in the book some cultures and societies, they say no without actually saying no. And this one in particular, I felt like I might be able to get some mileage out of this, and just using this might frame it a lot more nicely. So that's one specific thing. But yeah, all of that, like I said, is kind of encapsulated by the idea of saying no effectively and then eventually getting to yes, the invitation to reach an agreement.
Now, the part that could backfire, you're talking about the I would prefer not to phrase?
Yeah, because I can think of a couple people who may just say, well, that's nice, do it anyways.
Yep.
Because we haven't gotten to that point yet. You know, I mentioned the 3 different ways that this could play out, where we both are at the place where if I say I don't want to do this, like, oh, well, I respect that. I know you've got reasons, and so we'll do it a different way. I kind of think that could possibly happen in a couple different situations, but we'll see.
That's fair. My action item is fairly similar. Only instead of breaking it into 5 pieces, I just kind of summarize the whole thing, which is basically use yes, no, yes every time a big decision needs a no. And I guess that probably translates into just be aware of this and how I'm saying no and use respect whenever I'm doing that. So I'm kind of summarizing. I'm looking at this list of action items between us. There's absolutely no way we'll hold each other accountable on this in a very good way, other than just ask, how's it going? But
yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things that was kind of surprising to me about this book. But like I said, I actually think that this is better than what I had originally anticipated. Because if you're thinking about this through the lens of, oh, this book is going to allow me to just cut things, then you could hold people accountable to that. You could say, what are the things that you said no to? But really, the net result of saying no positively is that you haven't said no a bunch more times, but you've said yes a bunch more times in a way that is actually benefiting you.
Yes. Author's style. I have to say one thing, and we haven't talked about this in how it's written. He's very good at using stories. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that because there's a lot of cases where he proposes a concept and then he tells a story about it. And then he poses another concept and tells a story about it. It makes it very engaging, and it makes it a very easy book to read, and at times hard to put down. But I really appreciated that. But at the same time, it also feels like he's repeating. It has a little bit of that getting things done-ness to it, where he poses something and then repeats it and goes over it in more detail later on. It has a little bit of that flavor to it, but still a good read for sure.
So
I suppose I need
would
to
you
rate
it?
That, don't I? Yeah. I think I would put this at a 4.0. It's one of those that has a lot of wisdom in it and is highly valuable. I think I would highly recommend people read this. I'm just kind of stuck on that whole repeating thing a little bit, and some of it's kind of hard to apply. It's also not all exactly what I was thinking I was getting into. So because of that, I'm putting it at the 4.0.
All right. You are a tough grader when it comes to
I know, I am.
Sometimes. I'm going to give it 4.5 because I thought it was great. The only thing that's keeping me from giving it 5, I guess, is just trying to keep the fives a little bit more exclusive. It's not the same level of some of the other books that we've read where it just completely blew me away. But I was definitely very surprised by what I got out of this book, very pleasantly surprised by what I got out of this book. And I thought it was a very easy and approachable read. It was a pretty entertaining read. I would definitely recommend this to people.
Good deal. So your choice is up next. What do you have us going through, Mike?
I almost put 10% Happier here, but I mentioned previously The Art of Thinking Clearly by Rolf Dobelli. This is a book which is about cognitive biases. There's about 100 different chapters. Each chapter is just like 3 pages, and each chapter covers a different cognitive bias. So I've started this one, really, really interesting, and I'm looking forward to the conversation about this one.
That one will be fun. Following that one, I've selected The Legend of the Monk and the Merchant by Terry Felber. This is on the list of the Dave Ramsey books, so of course we need to go through it.
Nice. How close are we to finishing all the Dave Ramsey books?
I think that's the last one.
Okay.
I think. I need to go look at the list, but I think that's the last one. It feels like they just keep coming, doesn't it?
Well, I know we're making progress, so I'm just curious how many are actually in the set that he makes people read.
I think there's 5, and I feel like we've been through about 4, so I think this is the last one.
Gotcha.
I think. So Gap Books, sounds like you're in the middle of 10% Happier.
I've actually finished this one, but I'm putting it on here as my official recommendation because this book is awesome. I actually read this whole book in a day and a half, I believe. It's really entertaining. It's average size. It's like 230 pages or something like that.
Okay. So it's not like one of these allegories that's 100 pages long.
Nope. But like I mentioned earlier, Dan Harris who's the author. His writing style is awesome. Every single chapter has a very provocative title, and then you read the first sentence, and just he's the master at this. Where like there's instantly a hook set, and you're like, oh, I have to figure out what happens next.
Yeah.
And so you get to the end of a chapter, and you're like, oh, I don't want to start the next chapter. And you read the first sentence, you're like, okay, I'll read the next chapter. But it's like, really, really good.
So if I read this, don't read the first sentence. Okay, got it. My Gap book is The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F, I guess, by Mark Manson. This is one that Josh over on Theoretical wants to go through with me. So I guess we're doing a bookworm-esque episode at some point, and that book is probably one that doesn't fit the listenership of Bookworm real well. So thus, it's a Gap book. That's what I know.
I'm intrigued by the topic, but you will probably not get me to read that one.
Well, we'll see. I have to admit, I'm a little nervous about this one, but at the same time, knowing the topic of it, and because I haven't started it yet, and that's what I'm going to start this evening. But the topic I'm intrigued by, because I feel like it plays into the whole saying no thing fairly well, is my expectation. I'll have to give you more on that later because I don't know.
All right. If you want to recommend a book for us to read, you can do that by going to bookworm.fm/list. You can see all of the books that we've covered, all the books that we're going to cover. And on the right sidebar, there will be a button to recommend a book. We would love to get your recommendations. We've covered several reader recommendations, and I know we've got a couple more planned. So that's where you can go if you want to recommend a book.
And if you enjoy the podcast, would you mind leaving us an iTunes review? That would help a lot. Mike has a mission of de-seeding KCRW as the first listing on when you search for Bookworm on the iTunes store. You can help us beat them, but you need to leave a review. Just give us a quick rating, write something if you want. That would help us a lot. And if you want to ask questions, you want to take exception with something we've said, pose another topic for a conversation in the future, you can do that over on productivityguild.com. That's where some of the conversations about the bookworm shows occur.
All right, so thanks for listening. If you're reading along with us, the next book is The Art of Thinking Clearly by Rolf Dobelli, and we will talk to you next time.